Teddy baby, listen, eating your toys is not going to help you hit your macros. This is terrible. Look at, you ate his eyes. You're eating, okay. Why, hello there, endurance nerds, and a special welcome to the metabolic misfits, the calorie truthers, the hormone hawks, and the entire peanut gallery of internet nutrition dogmatists. Today, we're going to talk about something so fundamental, so universally butchered that I almost feel bad about having to make this video. But judging by the fact that calories don't matter is still trending in 2025, clearly we have some work to do.
Me fail English? That's impossible.
So let me say this plainly without bearing the lead. You lose fat when you burn more energy than you consume. That's not a diet culture lie. That's the first law of thermodynamics. And if that makes you mad, stick around because the real science is more fascinating than the hot takes. Let's start with a basic but critical fact. Everything that you eat is made of mass, actual molecules, protein, carbohydrates, and lipids. You chew them, swallow them, digest them, and then eventually those molecules make their way into your bloodstream. From there, they get delivered to all of the tissues in your body, muscles, liver, fat, kidneys, the works, and once inside those cells, those molecules undergo metabolism, a series of chemical reactions that either convert them into energy or store them for later. And the currency of that cellular energy is something called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. When your body breaks the bonds of ATP, it releases heat. That heat is what we measure in calories, a calorie being the amount of heat needed to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius. Technically, the energy in food is measured in kilocalories, 1,000 of those little c calories, but in nutrition we shorthand it as calories with a capital C. So when the food label says 200 calories, it really means 200,000 actual physics calories. Confusing? Slightly. Arbitrary? Not at all. It's a unit of energy, and we use it because the heat release is something that we can observe, something we can measure, quantify, and do so reliably. It's just physics applied to biology. Now, you might hear this argument that the body doesn't have calorie receptors. No, it doesn't. It has nutrient receptors for glucose, amino acids, and fatty acids. And internal systems monitor your energy state through ATP availability. Molecules like AMPK and mTOR respond to ATP levels to regulate your metabolism. The calorie is just a way for us to track how much energy is released when your body actually breaks down those nutrient molecules. Let's walk through an example. And I'm going to use a healthy amount of biological terms here, so bear with me. It's really not important that you remember them all. It's really more important that you understand the general path of molecules. So for this example, let's say that you eat a slice of bread. That bread's going to get digested into glucose, a simple sugar. Glucose is going to travel through your bloodstream and get pulled into your cells. Let's say, for this case, a muscle cell. And that's going to use a glucose transporter called GLUT4, which responds to insulin. Inside the cell, the glucose goes through glycolysis. I've talked about this quite a bit on this channel, but it's a metabolic pathway that reshapes the molecular structure. It gets chopped up and transforms until it becomes pyruvate, then acetyl-CoA, and finally it enters the mitochondria. You know, the powerhouse of the cell. Inside the mitochondria, glucose continues through the citric acid cycle, then the electron transport chain, where it finally produces ATP. And when that ATP is used, when that phosphate group is cleaved off, it releases heat. The heat is the measurable byproduct of energy use. That's where the calorie comes from. It's the consequence of your metabolism. Now, let's say instead of that slice of bread, you eat some fat, like olive oil. That fat is going to get digested into fatty acids and monoglycerides, absorbed through your intestinal lining, and packaged into structures called chylomicrons. These circulate through your bloodstream and your lymphatic system until they reach your cells, either muscle, liver, or fat tissue. Once inside of the cell, those fatty acids enter the mitochondria through a transport process involving something called carnitine. Once inside, they go through beta oxidation, a metabolic pathway that chops those fatty acid chains into 2 carbon units, converting them into acetyl-CoA, and then from there, just like glucose, they enter the citric acid cycle and the electron transport chain, ultimately producing ATP. And when that ATP is used, heat is released. Again, different fuel, same process, same output, same energy and heat, that's the calorie. But, and this is a big but, not all nutrients behave the same way before they're metabolized. Some are more likely to be stored, some stimulate more hormones, some make you feel full, some don't, and this is where all that confusion comes in. Take insulin, for example. It's a hormone released in response to elevated blood glucose levels, and it tells your cells, hey, we've got some fuel over here, let's store some of that. Insulin promotes nutrient uptake, glucose into muscle, and liver, and fat into your fat cells, and it inhibits the release of stored fat. So when the keto clan says that insulin can temporarily prevent fat breakdown, they're 100% correct. But that's not the same as saying that insulin causes fat gain all by itself. Insulin does not rise in a vacuum. It rises when you eat, and how much it rises depends on what and how much you eat. High carb meals, more insulin. High fat meals, less insulin. But let's pump the brakes because I can see the low carb crowd tasting victory here. The problem is the piece that they leave out, and that is that high-fat meals will often produce more ASP, or acylation-stimulating protein. We'll get a little bit more into that in a minute, but this is a much lesser-known hormone that, wait for it, promotes fat storage even when insulin is low, especially in high-fat diets. So if your argument is that I'm losing more fat on keto because my insulin is low, but you're smashing 3,000 calories of cheese and butter, you're not winning the argument here. You're just storing fat through a different hormonal pathway because your body still has to do something with all of that incoming energy. And that brings us to our bigger picture, that critical energy balance. Again, hormones do not exist in a vacuum. They are responding to the energy flowing into and through your system. So if you truly want to understand why fat loss happens or doesn't happen, you have to understand your body's daily energy requirement. This is generally referred to as your total daily energy expenditure, or TDEE. And your total daily energy expenditure is going to include your BMR, your basal metabolic rate, and this is the energy it takes to keep you alive at rest, the thermic effect of food, known as TEF, and that's the energy it takes to digest and process your meals, your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or NEAT, which refers to all of your subconscious movement, fidgeting, ambulation, standing, all that good stuff, and exercise activity thermogenesis, or EAT, which is the deliberate workouts and activity that we endurance nerds are all too familiar with. You add all of that up, and you're going to get your maintenance calories. If you eat at that level, your weight's going to stay stable. If you eat more, your body stores the excess, usually in fat cells. If you eat less, your body taps into stored energy, again, usually fat. And yes, you can also gain or lose lean mass depending on training, protein intake, other variables. But for the purposes of this video, we're just going to focus on that fat dynamics piece because that's really the driver of that calories in, calories out debate. But let me reinforce the point so it doesn't get lost in the sauce. If you eat less energy than you burn, your body has no choice but to use the stored energy to make up the difference. That's not optional. Your cells still need to generate ATP. And if they're not getting enough from food, they'll take it from your glycogen stores, your body fat, or that precious lean tissue if the deficit is large or prolonged. And yes, that energy release is regulated by hormones, but the hormones don't override the physics. They mediate how your body responds to the energy shortfall. Still with me? Good. That's the foundation. Let's zoom into fat loss itself. What's actually happening inside a fat cell when you lose weight? Fat cells, called adipocytes, are essentially storage units packed with triglycerides, which are bundles of 3 fatty acids that are attached to a glycerol backbone. But those fat molecules don't just sit there statically. Your fat cells are in a constant state of flux, breaking down triglycerides into free fatty acids to send into circulation, and then reassembling and storing new ones that enter from the bloodstream. This is happening all of the time, even at rest. The only thing that determines whether your fat stores grow or they shrink is the net direction of that flux. Are more fatty acids entering the cell and getting re-esterified into triglycerides, or are more being broken down and exported? If you're in an energy balance, fat in equals fat out. Your total fat mass stays the same. If you're in an energy surplus, more fatty acids are coming in than going out, so fat accumulates. And if you're in a calorie deficit, more fatty acids are being released and used for energy than are being stored, so the fat cells are going to shrink. That's it. That's the actual mechanism. No mystery, no magic, just plain old biochemistry. Molecules don't disappear, they move and transform. And whether they're moving in or out of your fat cells depends on what the rest of your body is going to need and whether that need is being met through food or has to be pulled from storage. Now let's put a little more meat on the bone, no pun intended, surrounding hormonal signaling. When you eat, especially carbohydrates, your blood sugar is going to rise. In response, your pancreas releases insulin. Insulin tells your fats, fuel is available over here, go ahead and absorb it. Muscle cells pull in glucose, liver cells storing glycogen, and fat cells increase fat uptake and decrease fat release. This is what people mean when they say that insulin suppresses fat breakdown. But here's what people get terribly wrong. That only matters if you're in a surplus. If you're in a deficit, even with insulin circulating, your body still needs energy. And once glycogen runs low, it has to turn to fat. It can't just decide to stop burning calories because insulin is present. It will override insulin signaling when the energy pressure is high enough. That's not a calories or hormone situation. They're part of the same system. Hormones are the messengers, and energy demand is the reason the messages are sent. Now we'll go back for a second to that acylation stimulating protein, or ASP. It's not as famous as insulin, but it plays a huge role in fat storage, especially on high-fat diets. ASP is stimulated directly by dietary fat, not carbohydrate, and it facilitates the storage of fatty acids into adipose tissue even when insulin is low. It operates through a different hormonal signal with the same metabolic endgame: put excess energy into fat cells. That's why low insulin does not mean that you're immune to fat gain. If you're mainlining ghee and bacon grease, ASP doesn't give a shit that your carbs are low. It's still escorting fat right into storage. People think that they can outsmart their body. They're just wrong. And this is why both high carb and high fat diets can lead to fat gain, and they can both lead to fat loss, because at the end of the day, it's not about which hormones are turned on. It's about whether your total energy intake exceeds what your body needs. You can lose fat with high insulin if your energy intake is low enough. You can gain fat with low insulin if your energy intake is too high, but you can't outrun simple biology with the diet of the week. People really get stuck in this cycle because they don't understand the mechanism that determines what your body needs. That comes down to metabolism, which which is just the sum of all of those chemical reactions in your body that use energy. It brings us back to your total daily energy expenditure as the best proxy for that need. Again, that includes your BMR, your NEAT, TES, and EAT. And the reality that people cannot wrap their heads around is that none of these components are a fixed number. No, not even your BMR. They can shift based on weight, age, lean mass, sleep, stress, and yes, hormones. And the lower your TDEE is, the more important your food choices are going to become. Because when calories are limited, the cost of any nutritional errors is going to go up tremendously. I think this is really important to zoom into this point. The lower your calorie intake, the harder it becomes to meet your nutrient needs, especially if you're smaller body to begin with. Women, for example, they often require fewer calories due to height, weight, and lean mass, but they don't proportionately require fewer vitamins, minerals, or essential fatty acids. Your need for iron, magnesium, calcium, B12, omega-3s. It doesn't shrink because your TDEE is 1700 instead of 2700. So the lower that your intake goes, the tighter your nutritional margin gets. That's why extremely low calorie diets are so hard to sustain. Not only are they psychologically taxing, they're biologically unsatisfying. To illustrate what's happening, let's look at what happens when you go into a calorie deficit. At first, your body responds by increasing fat mobilization. Fatty acids are pulled out of adipose tissue, travel through the bloodstream, and get oxidized by other tissues to make ATP. That's fat loss. But your body also senses that you're deviating from its set point, and it starts to fight back. Hunger increases. Those hunger hormones like ghrelin and neuropeptide Y ramp up. Satiety signals like peptide YY and leptin start to fall. Your movement may unconsciously decrease, lowering your NEAT, your reproductive hormones, your thyroid hormones. Even your neurotransmitters can start to shift. This is where dieting gets hard. People think it's because calories stopped mattering, but it's because your body is making it harder for you to maintain the deficit. You've probably heard somebody say, or maybe you've said it yourself, that I broke my metabolism. You didn't. You triggered its natural defense mechanism, and it's doing precisely what it evolved to do. Starvation mode, at least the way that most people are using that term, is not real. Your body doesn't just stop burning fat because you're eating too little. What it does is respond to sustained energy restriction by becoming a lot more efficient. That means fewer unconscious movements, a slight drop in resting metabolic rate, and maybe even a lower body temperature. And when you weigh less, it takes fewer calories to move that smaller body around. Your body is putting on display its adaptive physiology. It's protecting you, and it still obeys the laws of thermodynamics. Let's give a quick example though. Suppose your maintenance calories at 180 pounds or 2,500 per day. You cut to 2,000, you start losing fat. As you drop to 170, then 160, your maintenance level gradually declines. Your cells don't actually need less ATP per task, but there is less of you now in those cells to maintain. Smaller mass means less energy required. And with a likely lowered NEAT and BMR, your initial 500 calorie deficit might shrink to 300 or 200. Hell, it might no longer be deficit at all if you don't adjust intake or activity. The body wants to be in homeostasis. And if this is clicking for you, go ahead and like the video and subscribe. I go deep into this type of content all the time, and it helps the algorithm show it to more people who actually care about physiology instead of those quick fixes. But the human body is marvelous in its ability to adapt. Because of that, we need to continue to change the stimulus if we want to continue to see adaptation. That's true in training, and it's true when it comes to managing your energy balance. And I think for a good lot of you, this makes a ton of sense. So where do the calories don't matter people go so wrong? And it's not that their individual facts are wrong. Insulin does blunt fat breakdown. Nutrient type does affect hormonal response. Fiber does stretch the stomach. Fats and proteins impact satiety much differently. All of this stuff is true. The mistake is the reductive approach of pretending that those things exist outside of the energy balance equation. They don't. They affect the equation, but they don't nullify it. Let's say that again more clearly. The hormonal response to food changes how you feel, how you store, how much you eat, but not the fact that energy in versus energy out is still the governing principle of fat loss. If you're over-consuming calories from clean foods, then you still gain fat. This is exceedingly uncommon because the volume needed to overeat on vegetables and legumes is formidable. If you're under-consuming calories from junk foods, you still lose fat. Will you feel different? Yes. Will the long-term effects differ? Absolutely. Will your muscle-to-fat ratio on the clean versus dirty diet be different with calories being equal? More than likely. But energy balance still decides whether your body adds or subtracts tissue. And this would be a good time to dispel another myth that hangs around in corners of the internet where dreams go to die. And that's the idea that calories are just a physics concept and therefore irrelevant to biology. No. Calories are how we measure the energy cost of biology. You don't metabolize physics, you metabolize molecules. Those molecules have mass. That mass is converted through metabolic pathways and ATP, which releases heat, which is measured in calories. Biology is the application of physics. Calories are the bridge. Jesus, stupid just makes me completely crazy. But let's talk about the popular false dichotomy. A calorie of sugar is not the same as a calorie of olive oil. And a foot of rope is different than a foot of wire. It's just a simple category error. The substrate does not change the measurement of the calories. Nutrition Functionally, yes, they're very different. They affect insulin differently. They digest differently. They impact satiety differently. But that doesn't mean you get to smuggle in the false conclusion that it impacts energy balance differently. Energetically, 1 calorie of sugar and 1 calorie of olive oil still release the same amount of heat when metabolized. That's the point. Nutrients are not equal, but calories are. That's where so many people get tripped up. They confuse the energetic value of a nutrient with its physiological effects. You should care about both, but do not mix them up. And if you've ever lost weight on keto, low fat, high carb, intermittent fasting, or whatever new flavor of restriction is in vogue this week, you did so because you created an energy deficit. The pathway was different, the hormones were different, but the mechanism was always the same. Let's bring this point full circle. You now know that fat loss is the result of a net outflow of stored energy, specifically stored mass in the form of triglycerides from your fat cells. You know that your body doesn't count calories, but it does measure the energy via ATP availability. You know that hormones don't override energy balance. They respond to it, regulate it, and mediate it. And you know that nutrients are not equal, but calories are, because the heat release from ATP is chemically indistinguishable regardless of the source. But the thing you probably want to know is how this translates into your real life. Let's talk about why calorie tracking works and where it fails. Tracking calories is like balancing your checkbook. It doesn't tell you what to spend it on, but it does tell you if you're in the red or if you're in the black. You can eat 2,000 calories of cookies or 2,000 calories of lean protein and oats. One of those will feel awful, leave you starving, and probably ruin your gut. Yes, it's the cookies, poor cookies. But both can lead to fat loss if they match your metabolic demand. I want to be clear that I'm not saying just eat less. That's a lazy, insulting oversimplification. I'm saying that the quantity determines whether you gain or lose fat, and the quality determines how manageable and sustainable that process feels. Here's where that's going to matter. Different foods have wildly different effects on hunger, satiety, digestion, thermic effect, and even mood. Protein has the highest thermic effect of food, meaning that your body burns more energy digesting it and processing it than it does for carbs or fat. It's also the most satiating macronutrient. Protein intake strongly influences hunger-regulating hormones like peptide YY, GLP-1, and ghrelin. Your body literally adjusts appetite based on how much protein that you eat. Then there's fiber. It stretches the stomach, blunts the rise in blood sugar, and slows gastric emptying, which can make you feel fuller for much longer. Then we have fats, which are the most calorie-dense macronutrient, and they have a relatively low thermic effect of food. They can be satiating for some people, especially in the context of whole food, high-fat meals, but the idea that fat is universally the most satiating is a myth. Satiety response to fat varies wildly by individual, and if dietary fat were inherently satisfying, people wouldn't down 1,500 calories of fast food and still be thinking about fries on the drive home. And then, of course, we have our much maligned carbs. They digest quickly, especially in refined forms, which often leads to that short-lived satiety, but fiber-rich complex carbs slow digestion and can be reasonably filling. Their thermic effect falls somewhere in that moderate range, and they're easily burned for energy, especially around training. Their impact really does depend on the type and the timing. This is why a calorie is a calorie when it comes to energy, but not all calories feel the same in your body. And that's the trap many people fall into. They mistake physiological experience for energetic truth. Now let's talk diet flexibility. If you understand the calorie balance mechanism, you can pick the strategy that works best for your biology and your brain. Keto does work for some people because the high fat is satiating for them and their appetite drops. High carb, low fat works for others because it allows for larger food volume and less dietary fat intake. Intermittent fasting can work simply because it reduces the eating window, and the calorie intake is going to drop naturally. But if you eat 5,000 calories in one meal, fasting or not, you're going to gain body fat. So stop arguing about which diet is best. They all work when they create a deficit, and they all fail when they don't. The best diet is the one that you can sustain long enough to reach your goals without feeling like you're at war with your own body. And the only way to do that is by respecting your metabolism, not trying to hack your way around it. Now, I know a few of you might be out there poised to comment, and people get really sensitive around this, but I'm going to push back really hard on anybody subscribing to this narrative that I'm not losing weight, but I'm in a deficit. And I'm going to say this, are you really? Because unless you have an updated laboratory measurement of your typical BMR, are accurately measuring your food and tracking all of your intake, are counting for any reduction in NEAT, are counting for any of those cheat meals, are adjusting for metabolic adaptation, and are measuring progress over weeks and not just days, there's a very, very good chance you're eating more than you think. Hunger ramps up, NEAT drops, you swipe a few bites here, a few licks there, and then suddenly you're 300 to 400 calories over what you thought. Even if you have the discipline of a damn Marine, accurately measuring and accounting for the biological shifts alone is damn near impossible without a full army of scientists at your back. This isn't about blame. This is about biology. Hunger and fatigue are designed to make you overshoot. You're wired for survival, not aesthetics. And when people challenge you on that, don't take it as a value judgment. Take it for what it is. A reminder that our bodies are complicated, intelligent systems. More often than not, breaking through those plateaus, or especially that last handful of pounds, it's going to require the patience and the willingness to measure and adjust your intake and activity with really grueling precision. You need to account for those moving targets your body is going to throw at you. And for being honest, most people who think they've broken their metabolism are just frustrated by the fact that their metabolism responds to weight loss. Of course it does. That's how it keeps you alive. Your metabolism didn't break. It adjusted just like it was supposed to. You got smaller, so you burned fewer calories. You got hungrier because your body senses the drop in leptin and fat mass. And you moved less because your NEAT fell without you realizing it. And that brings us back to the cold, hard truth. Fat loss is not linear, it's not fair, and it doesn't give a shit about your feelings. It follows the same rules no matter how you slice your macros, what time you eat, or which influencer you follow. Calories in versus calories out is the framework. Hormones are the communication system. Nutrients are the vehicles. You still have to drive. And if that bothers you, good. Discomfort means you're learning something. The fitness industry thrives on oversimplification because nuance does not sell, but reality is nuanced, and you're better off knowing the full picture even if it's more complex than you'd hoped than spending another 5 years chasing magic macros, carb phobia, or some obscure fasting window that you saw on Instagram. You do not need another diet that lies to you. You need one that respects your biology and your brain, and that starts with an understanding of what truly governs fat loss. If you've made it this far, kudos. You've officially graduated past 99% of internet nutrition discourse. And if you didn't, don't worry. I'll still be here next time, poking holes in guru logic and explaining oversimplified concepts with a side of sass. Until then, eat smart, train hard, do all the YouTubey stuff, and respect the damn physics. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. See ya.